All right, good afternoon. In a short while, I will be joined by Marc-André Franche, the head of financing for the Peacebuilding Fund. He will brief you on the forthcoming high-level replenishment conference of the Peacebuilding Fund, which is scheduled to take place on the 26th of January. And after that, we will have our regular briefing from Brendan Varma on behalf of the President of the General Assembly. As you saw late yesterday afternoon, we issued a series of statements responding positively to the decisions issued by the United States President Joseph Biden. The Secretary General warmly welcomed President Biden's steps to re-enter the Paris Agreement on climate change and join the growing coalition of governments, cities, states, businesses, and people taking ambitious action to confront the climate crisis. We look forward to the leadership of the United States in accelerating global efforts towards net zero, including bringing forward the new nationally determined contributions with ambitious 2030 targets and climate financing in advance of COP26 in Glasgow this year. And in relation to that, I just want to clarify and say that yesterday the U.S. notified the Secretary General of its acceptance of the Paris Agreement of December 12, 2015. The U.S. signed the Paris Agreement on April 22nd, 2016, and expressed its consent to be bound by the agreement by acceptance on the 3rd of September 2016, before withdrawing from the agreement as of November 4th, 2020. A new instrument of acceptance of the Paris Agreement by the U.S. was signed by President Biden on the 20th of January and deposited with the Secretary General the same day, that is yesterday. The Paris Agreement will enter into force for the U.S. on February 19th, 2021, in accordance with Article 21, subpara 3 of the agreement. And that's just sort of a legal notice. And it is the new instruments of acceptance by the U.S. have also been posted on the UN's treaty section website. The Secretary General also welcomed the U.S.'s stated re-engagement with the World Health Organization. Supporting WHO is absolutely critical to the world's effort for a better coordinated response against COVID-19, the Secretary General said. Now is the time for unity and for the international community to work together in solidarity to stop this virus and its shattering consequences. With vaccines being a critical tool in the battle against COVID-19, the U.S. joining and supporting the COVAX facility will give momentum to efforts to ensure equitable access to vaccines for all countries. And regarding that, on kind of the legal aspects of that, yesterday, the U.S. formally informed the Secretary General of the revocation of its notification of withdrawal of July 6, 2020 from the Constitution of the World Health Organization, which would have been effective under certain conditions on July 6th of this year. Accordingly, the U.S. remains a party to the WHO Constitution and without interruption, a member of the World Health Organization since June 21st, 1948. And lastly, we also welcomed the positive steps announced by the U.S. administration relating to migration and refugees. The Secretary General looks forward to working with the new U.S. administration to strengthen multilateral cooperation in these areas and hopes the U.S. will join the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. The UN assistance mission in Iraq strongly condemned today the suicide attacks which targeted civilians in Baghdad, causing scores of casualties. The mission that such a despicable act will not weaken Iraq's march towards stability and prosperity. They offer their sincere condolences to the families of the deceased and wish the injured a speedy recovery. And we expect a more formal statement from the Secretary General on that. Couple of items to flag for you on Syria. In a joint statement, the UN resident coordinator and humanitarian coordinator for Syria, Imran Riza, and the regional humanitarian coordinator for the Syria crisis, Mohammed Hadi, have expressed serious concerns over the deteriorating security conditions at Al-Hol camp in the northeast. Between the 1st and the 16th of January, we received reports of the murders of 12 Syrian and Iraqi camp residents, including one woman Iraqi refugee. Another person was critically injured in a violent attack. These disturbing events indicate an increasingly untenable security environment at Al-Hol. They also jeopardize the UN and the UN's humanitarian partners' ability to safely deliver critical humanitarian assistance to its residents. And I have an update for you, and a statement rather, on the Independent Senior Advisory Panel on Humanitarian Deconfliction in Syria. As you may recall, last year on April 6th, the Secretary General submitted to the President of the Security Council a summary of a report by the UN Headquarters Board of Inquiry to investigate certain incidents that had occurred in northwest Syria since September 17th, 2017, in which facilities of the UN in which facilities on the UN's deconfliction list or supported by the United Nations were destroyed or damaged as a result of military operations. In his letter transmitting the report to the Council, the Secretary General wrote at the time, "The Board of Inquiry has made a series of recommendations, which I am considering carefully. Some of the issues raised are complex, including the question of which parties to a conflict should be given information intended to support deconfliction. In order to help to determine how best to address the recommendations of the Board, I'm planning to appoint a senior independent advisor with expertise and experience in this area, and I will also be open to receiving views from member states on the matter." As a result, and following consultations, the Secretary General has decided to appoint a 3-person independent senior advisory panel on humanitarian deconfliction in Syria, composed of the following members: Mr. Jan Egeland of Norway, who will chair, Ms. Erika Feller of Australia, and Mr. Radwan Noussier of Tunisia. The panel will conduct its work independently and will provide the Secretary General with advice on how to strengthen the deconfliction mechanism operated by OCHA in Syria, on the recommendations related to the deconfliction mechanism presented by the Board of Inquiry, and on lessons that can be learned for the future. The panel will began its work on January 11th of this year and is expected to report back to the Secretary General with a final report by May 10th of this year. In the Security Council this morning, the head of the UN peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic, Mankeur Ndiaye, said that the country faces the grave risk of a setback. In remarks delivered by video, he said this could undermine everything that the Council and the partners of the Central African Republic have helped build. He made a forceful appeal for additional support. Ongoing violence against civilians, authorities, security forces, and peacekeepers is testing the capacities of the mission, he said, to cope with the new threat and to avoid that it takes a lasting hold on the country's territory. The response of the mission, and especially of the forces, must be frank, clear, and robust. He added that the situation remains tense following the creation of a new coalition of armed groups, the Coalition pour des Patriotes pour le Changement, the CPC, whose alliances with political actors, in particular the former president François Bozizé, is now well established. Their initial goal was to disrupt last month's elections. Most recently, they were attempting to unseat President Touadéra. The head of the peacekeeping mission said the only sustainable answer to today's challenge is political. During this crisis, Mr. Ndiaye said that the Central Africans have demonstrated they are no longer willing to tolerate the use of violence to deprive them of their fundamental rights, such as the right to vote. A quick update from Guatemala. From Central America, where our UN team in Honduras, led by the resident coordinator, Alice Shackelford, is working with local and national authorities to address the needs of migrants returning from Guatemala. Since yesterday, additional authorities, with the support of the UN's Children's Fund, have provided care to 100 children. Over 80% of them are traveling alone or without the company of a guardian or adult. In Guatemala, the UN team, led by Rebecca Arias, continues working with the authorities to support migrants. Around 3,000 women, men, and children have reportedly returned to Honduras. The UN refugee agencies there continues monitoring a small group of up to 100 people who are currently in shelters. And tomorrow, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is set to enter into force. You may recall that on October 24th of last year, the treaty reached its 50th ratification, fulfilling the conditions of its entry into force. At the time, the Secretary General said the treaty represented a meaningful commitment towards the total elimination of nuclear weapons, which remains the highest disarmament priority of the United Nations. We will have a statement as well as a video message recorded by the Secretary General to mark the treaty's entry into force. I think it's been shared with you under embargo in many, many languages. And from South Sudan, the peacekeeping mission there has received reports of sporadic intercommunal conflict caused by cattle raiding in Greater Tanj and the Warrap state of South Sudan. Fighting there has reportedly led to deaths, injuries, and population displacement. The mission is monitoring the situation closely and is preparing to intensify patrols to deter further violence. UNMISS is also working with state authorities to establish a temporary operating base in the Tanj area to reduce tensions and build confidence. Additionally, the mission is stepping up its community sensitization activities in Warrap through peace campaigns. Those campaigns are intended to raise awareness among residents on the need for social cohesion, as well as the benefits of peaceful cattle migration season. Pramila Patten, the Secretary General's Special Representative for Sexual Violence in Conflict, says she's greatly concerned by serious allegations of sexual violence in Tigray in Ethiopia. This includes a high number of alleged rapes in the capital of Mekele. These are disturbing reports of there are disturbing reports of individuals allegedly forced to rape members of their own family under threats of imminent violence. Some women have also been forced by military men to have sex in exchange for basic commodities. In addition, there are increasing reports of sexual violence against women and girls. This is happening in a number of refugee camps. She called on all parties involved in the hostilities to commit to a zero-tolerance policy for crimes, for sexual crimes. She also called on the government to fully exercise its due diligence obligations to protect civilians from sexual and other violence. And today, the Economic and Social Affairs Department announced members of its second high-level advisory board on economic and social affairs. The 20 members of the board will closely collaborate with DESA to provide guidance on focused recommendations for the Secretary General to respond to the current and future socioeconomic challenges caused in the post-COVID-19 world, and as well to advance the decade of action on the SDGs. The list is online. More good news, more money coming in. We thank our friends in Germany and in New Zealand for their full payments to the 2021 regular budget. We now have 12 members of the honor roll. I think I've spoken enough. Your turn. Edie, and then Celia.
Thank you, Steph. Can you just confirm what time the nuclear treaty comes into effect? Is it midnight New York time? Is it GMT time?
It is. I will try to speak from memory here. It's a strange system where it is a minute after midnight in each time zone. But we've released the statement will be ready to go as of a minute after midnight New York time on Friday.
Okay.
So
secondly, does the Secretary, there was a fire at the main pharmaceutical company producing COVID-19 vaccines in India today. 5 people were killed. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that? And my only other question is there any update on a new special representative for the Secretary General in Lebanon?
The short answer on Lebanon is no. We hope that I don't have anything. Let me take this seriously because it is a serious matter. We are actively, the process is actively moving. I don't have anything yet to announce to you. On India, I would just say we obviously are saddened by the loss of life and send our condolences to the families impacted, and we hope the fire is fully investigated. Celia.
Stéphane, can we expect the new U.S. administration to pay what they owe to the UN anytime soon, now that we have a new president?
I mean, I think that's a question for my counterparts in Washington. You know, we engage with every member states on payments. The previous administration had also paid, and I mean, obviously there remains U.S. arrears, but it's not as if the payments had completely stopped during the last 4 years. On the contrary, they had come, but there is arrears to be set. So,
but they still owe a lot of money.
Yes, and that's been the situation for quite some time with the U.S. So we will engage with this U.S. administration, but feel free to ask them and tell me what they say. Iftikhar.
Thank you, Steph. In a letter to the Secretary General, Pakistan ambassador has urged him to use his influence with India to release a seriously ill Kashmiri leader, Yasin Malik, who is languishing in a New Delhi jail. The ambassador has also forwarded to the Secretary General a public appeal from his wife, Mashal, saying that the prolonged incarceration of her husband has left him in fragile health. Does the Secretary General have any reaction?
I'm not aware of the case, but send me an email with details, and I will look into it. But I just off the top of my head, I'm not aware of the case. All right. If you have a question, wave your hands up in the air. Yes, Errol?
Okay, thank you, Steph. A couple of things. You said one president at the time. Now that we have a new sheriff in town, I mean, new president in Washington, Secretary General talked, then elected president. Is he planning to reach Mr. Guterres soon to the new President Biden and talk about Yemen situation?
Well, we have made it, I mean,
I don't hear you. I don't hear you.
Well, others do. Do you want to, can you hear me now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. We look for, obviously, the Secretary General looks forward to speaking to President Biden at his earliest convenience. The Secretary General is available whenever, but obviously we fully understand that the new president has a long list of to-do list, and we know he's busy. And but we do very much look forward to a first phone call whenever that can happen.
So you assume that the UN is not on his priority?
Not at all. That's not what I said. We know. First of all, I think if you look at the two of the executive orders that were signed yesterday, even three of them, a top priority involved the UN. So I think that I would not agree with your analysis on that at all. We have just made it known to the U.S. mission here that the Secretary General is available and looking forward to speak to President Biden whenever he has the time. But we're not, you know, Secretary General has a thick skin. It's no one is being slighted in any way, shape, or form. And on the contrary, we're very delighted that some of the first actions that President Biden took when he walked into the White House was a return to the Paris Climate Agreement, was a return to, or not even a return to WHO, a halt of the withdrawal from WHO. So I think that itself sends a very strong signal, more than any phone call could have done.
Just one more, if I can, regarding the vaccination of the Secretary General. Did he has had already today his vaccination?
That has now been pushed back by a week. It will take place on the 28th. In fact, he will have a press conference with you, and then he will go get a shot to vaccinate himself. Maybe we should have done it the other way around. Maybe we should have done it the other way around. Exactly.
And since you have the new action of U.S. administration on COVID and vaccination, how soon do you expect or predict that we are going to have open fully or next stage openness of the United Nations?
Have what open?
How soon do you expect that we are going to get a new stage for opening of UN, or
I mean,
the full open?
it depends on the virus, and it depends on the situation here and on the decisions taken by the relevant health authorities in the city and the state. So, I mean, we're taking that one day. That's not a political decision. That is a public health decision, and we remain in contact with the city on that. Okay. Yes, Ms. Sato-san, who's, I think, in the shadows. There we go. But I still recognize you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sato.
The background is a little bit dark. So,
Yeah.
so my question is about TPNW, which you just mentioned. I heard that there is an online meeting tomorrow, which the Secretary General may join. If you have information, please elaborate. That is one thing. You know, one more question is also on the TPNW. Is it possible or is it probable for Secretary General to hold the first meeting of the state party of the TPNW by end of this year?
That I cannot. I'm not in an ability to predict if there is if he will be able to do that by the end of the year. And as of a meeting, I'm not aware. I haven't seen anything on his calendar to that effect. But I will double. I'm just checking now. I will double check again. Toby, you had a question too. Let's vary the NHK questions here.
This is a very producerial question, which is I'm just double checking the embargo timing. So it's at 00:01 tonight is when that Secretary General's remarks will be public.
It is 1 minute after midnight. So I mean, Eastern Standard Time, right? So if you stay up till midnight tonight, stay up an extra minute, and then you can release the statement. How about that? Okay, Mr. Reinl.
Hi, Stéphane. Thanks so much. You told us something really interesting about Al-Hol camp in Syria before. I'm wondering if there's anything else you can tell us about that. For example, what kind of team does the UN have in Al-Hol? Is it doing anything to investigate these deaths, these murders? And does the UN believe that they are related to remnants of the Islamic State?
No, we have no forensic capability, investigative capability, nor mandate to do so. But I'll see what more information I can get for you. All right.
Can I do one more, Steph?
Yes, go ahead.
It's a really nerdy question, and I'm a little bit loath to ask it. But Joe Biden signed the re-entry into the Paris Accord last night. He was in the Oval Office when he did that, and you say that the instrument was deposited with the UN in New York the same day. I'm wondering, is it the same document that he signed, and it had to be driven from Washington to New York, or can you just send a PDF and then that can be deposited? How does that work?
Of technology, there was a letter that was signed, and it was scanned and sent electronically to the United Nations here in New York. Okay, unless somebody has another question, we will turn to our guest.